Good evening. Welcome to Globespan 24/7. I am your host, Vishnu Bisram. Today is Wednesday, May 11th. May 12th. Sorry, May 12th. Um, we have a special edition of Globespan tonight on Indian arrival and the contributions of the Indo-Caribbean community to the Caribbean and the diaspora. With us this evening of very three distinguished gentlemen. Two of them, in fact, all three of them, somehow or the other, were former politicians. Two of them served as ministers of government. One, of course, prime minister, and then we have Ravi who also served as a minister, as a member of parliament in Guyana. So we have a Guyanese, a Surinamese, and a Trinidadian Tobagonian with us this evening. This is Globespan 24/7. It is owned by Mr. Nohar Singh of Globespan, and our technical advisor tonight is Mr. Devin. Gentlemen, welcome all, viewers, watchers, listeners. Thank you for tuning in. So we are, of course, discussing Indian arrival. So if I may begin first, what is meant by this concept, this term Indian arrival? And if I could ask Mr. Ravi Dev, if you may begin.
Well, at a very mundane level, we can see Indian arrival as the arrival of Indian indentured in Guyana and in the other Caribbean countries. In Guyana, it was on May 5th, 1838, and for us it signified Indian arrival in the entire Western Hemisphere. Some may quibble about individuals who may have gone to the United States or Canada before that, and there are some records of some individuals, but they miss the point. Indian arrival inaugurates, and we must understand and appreciate this, a new system of labor following slavery. And we can see it as a transition towards what we may call free labor. The word free, of course, in inverted commas. So it's a very important landmark, not only for us as a people, but in terms of how we look at labor and how it has been considered. One may also say there was indentureship before. In the 17th century. Whites were brought from their own countries to the Caribbean or to the United States, but our indentureship is qualitatively different because it was initiated and sustained by a colonial imperial power that had conquered several countries in the world. And what is significant and what remains significant, the laborers who were indentured were all non-white. And following slavery, that had its own consequence. So to come back to your question, Indian arrival is a subset of the arrival of indentures to the Caribbean. They were elsewhere, but we're talking about the Caribbean. And therefore, it is very significant in so many ways. And I am very happy that we are commemorating it because it has a lot of ramifications for our histories.
Former Prime Minister, Mr. Basdeo Panday, welcome, sir, to join us in the program.
There had been a struggle, as I'm sure you're aware, for a very long time for the 30th of May to be declared Indian Arrival Day, which was the day on which the Fatal Razak, the first ship, came to Trinidad. I think the motive behind struggling for Indian Arrival Day was recognition. We wanted to be recognized as having come here, having been here, and having lived here, having participated in it, and we wanted to be acknowledged as a group of people who came and struggled with this country. I think that was the motive behind the struggle for Indian Arrival Day, which went on for a very long time, incidentally. And an election was coming up, and Mr. Manning thought that he would make capital out of this desire that was welling up. and he declared that 30th arrival day. He leave out the Indian part. And of course, we were very annoyed about that. And when I became prime minister soon afterwards, I renamed the day Indian Arrival Day.
And Professor Maurits Hassankhan, University of Suriname, anything to add to that, Indian arrival in Suriname?
We commemorate and celebrate it every year, but we call it Immigration Day. Indian Immigration, we have Japanese Immigration Day, we have Chinese Immigration Day. This Indian Immigration Day has been commemorated, and I want to say something about it because it is not only commemoration but also celebration. And why? Because this date, and that is the 5th of June, we see it as a beginning of the Indian community in Suriname. So, and on that day, we commemorate our past, what has happened, to look back and what we have achieved. And when we look back what we have achieved, then we say we have also reason to celebrate. Although indentured labor was not something to celebrate, but thanks to indentured labor, people were able to come to Suriname, and we have achieved something as a community.
And just for the record, May 5th is Indian Arrival Day, a holiday in Guyana. May 30th is Indian Arrival Day in Trinidad, a holiday. But in Suriname, we don't have a holiday?
No. As I said previously, the Indians are organizing activities, but when we have a round figure, for instance, we had in 2018, it was 145th anniversary, then it was declared an holiday. So we expect in 2023, when we will celebrate and commemorate 150th anniversary, then without any problem, the government will declare it as a national holiday. So we don't have a problem with that, because in Suriname we have so many ethnic groups, and each of them has their own day. So if all of them become a holiday, then we can have a problem. We have holidays for ethnic groups, we have holidays for religions. So we have Idul Fitr and Idul Adha, we have Holi, we have Diwali, so we have the Christian days, and so on. So there are people who are complaining that in Suriname we have too much holidays.
Okay, so we look forward for June 2023. I'm sure all of us will try to make that journey to Suriname once we get control over this pandemic to celebrate.
I want to use the opportunity to invite you now already for June 2023.
Okay, thank you very much. So the theme, the focus of tonight's program is Indian arrival and the contributions of Indians to the region and to the diaspora at large. So if I may ask you, Professor Hassankhan, in Suriname, how would you assess, evaluate the contributions of Indians to Suriname and to the greater region, if you wish?
So let's say, as we know that the indentured laborers were brought to the former sugar colonies to help save the economy of these the islands and the colonies. That happened also in Suriname after the end of slavery. After abolition, indentured labor were brought to the country, and the colonial authorities were successful in saving the economy. So thanks to the indentured laborers, especially Indian indentured laborers, Suriname was able to continue the plantation economy, and the sugar production improved, just as happened also in Guyana, and I think also in Trinidad. When the indentured laborers arrived, then the production of sugar increased in all those countries. That is one, that is in economic field. Second is, if we look to the population, it was an increase of the population. Suriname was a huge country, but we didn't have enough people. So with the coming of the indentured laborers from different countries, the population became bigger, grow, and that was also better for the country. Next is the development of a multi-ethnic and pluralistic society with different cultures. So as you know, that with the coming of the Indian indentured laborers, we had the introduction of Hinduism in the Caribbean, also in Suriname. We see also a reintroduction of Islam in these countries. As you know, that Islam has not been introduced only by the coming of the Indians, but during slavery, we had also people who were in South Africa, in Africa, they were brought, and among them you had a number of Muslims. But that's why I say it is a reintroduction of Islam in the Caribbean, in Suriname also. So that is, I think, very, very important for these countries, that we have a multi-ethnic, multicultural society. And in Suriname, we are happy that we don't have as much tensions as you have in Guyana between the ethnic groups. So about that, we are happy. Although there is also ethnocentrism, and that is a negative aspect of the diverse community, that different groups, if they don't understand each other, the relations are not always very good. So, and yeah, I think that is all I can say. And in the cultural field, if we look to different aspects of culture, language.
If I may stop you there, we can come back to that. If I can get the contributions of former Prime Minister Basdeo Panday, Ravi Dev, and then we'll talk about cultural contributions. Mr. Panday?
Yeah. What were we on?
We are talking about the contributions of the indentured Indian laborers to the region, Trinidad and the greater region.
Well, first of all, as you know, the Indians came to Trinidad after the abolition of slavery. And the sugar industry, which was the mainstay of the economy, was dying. And the presence of the Indians therefore revived the sugar industry and made it the mainstay of the economy. So that was the first contribution, a contribution to the economy. And then because of the rivalry between the Afro-Trinidadian and the Indo-Trinidadian, and the dominance of the state and the controlling forces by the Afro-Trinidadian Tobagonian electorate, the Indians were discriminated against insofar as the public service was concerned, insofar as the oil industry was concerned. And because of this, what they did was they sent their children to school eventually, and they educated their children, but they educated their children not to fit into the public service or anything like that, because they weren't getting there anywhere. They were not to be engineers or anything like that, because they were not going to get into the oil industry anyway. What they did was they created doctors and lawyers. And so many doctors in Trinidad and Tobago today are Indians. So they added to the professional human stock of Trinidad. As a matter of fact, it's very strange that I should mention that. You know, COVID has spread very widely in Trinidad, and 2 doctors have died. They are both Indians. They were both Indians. So that is the one thing they did. They introduced a level of professionalism and technical advancement. But again, because they were discriminated against from getting jobs in the public service, they resorted to agriculture. They sustained the plantation economy, as I said, but they introduced into Trinidad a new culture of food and music and festivals. And they actually had a tremendous influence on changing the culture of Trinidad, or influencing, not changing, influencing the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know if anywhere else in the world there is something called chutney singing. And they introduced festivals, of course, Eid and all these festivals that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, they introduced that. So they had a great influence, I think, on the development and the direction that the society took. And that's why I say Indian Arrival Day was something for recognition of the contribution they had made to this society.
Okay, so and Mr. Ravi Dev, former member of Parliament of Guyana.
I want to go back to the original question, because when you ask what is the Indian arrival, I just spoke about the what. But I want to talk a little bit about specifically in Guyana, because it has to do with what we're talking about. Because in Guyana, even though many of us followed the early lead of our Trinidadian brothers and sisters, in Guyana, we called for Indian Arrival Day. Before that, it was called Immigration Day, which was a catch-all term, as Maurits said in Suriname. Same thing here. But it is very important to note when these calls for recognition of our day. It started in 1960 when a Dr. Balwant Singh, he called it Ramakhan Day. He said that from the first boat, Ram and Khan stepped off, and he called it Ramakhan Day. It was around 1960. Now, it is very important because when we look at what was going on in 1960, it was a struggle for who was going to control the state. And by that time, it had become a struggle between Indian Guyanese and African Guyanese. So in a sense, I want to support what Mr. Panday, Prime Minister Panday said. It was really a call for recognition because we were seeing the intrigues to keep us out of power, of not having us being part and parcel of what constituted in Guyana or in Trinidad, part of that nation. So it was a call for that recognition that, listen, and this was where specifically when my group came back to Guyana and we struggled for it, we said our Indian arrival, it announced that we had arrived because you started on a journey, and when you arrive, you are now home. So this was now our home. By 1955, the last ship, the Resurgent, had taken back 243 Indians, the very last ship. So there was no going back to any Mother India. We had our linkages, cultural linkages with India. Our disjuncture from India was not the abyssal one, like an abyss, as in slavery with Africa. We retained that connection, but this was our new home, and we were demanding, as Mr. Panday said, recognition of the facticity of that. So when it comes now to our contribution, by that time we had made the contribution that I would allude to. And first and foremost, like what again Mr. Panday said, the survival of this country called Guyana. Even more than Trinidad, sugar was the reason for Guyana. But sugar in Guyana is unique that you have to have a seawall, which is tremendously expensive to maintain. You have to have what we call the back dam, again tremendously important. So without a crop like sugar, Guyana would have reverted back into the mangrove that had to be cleared by our slave forebears. And this is why I think the Indian arrival is an epochal event. And it has to be noted because there would not have been that expenditure to think. So our contribution first and foremost is to keep Guyana as a viable enterprise as a whole. The other contributions, of course, are there, and I don't want to repeat what had been said before. We were locked out of, in those days, the major portions of the economy, but we created our own economy in rice. And today, it is not an irony, but it is now, I think, payback time where sugar has now almost disappeared, and rice we are now shipping from Guyana 600,000 tons. One of the larger, we are now among the top 15 producers in the world in terms of export, and it was created solely and totally by Indian indentured workers.
I saw Mr. Panday, you had your hand up. You wanted to make a point?
No, I was going to make the point that he just made. That is a contribution of the Indian indentured labor in Guyana was the introduction of rice planting and rice growing and rice production. I don't think that has happened anywhere else in the Caribbean. So
Suriname,
yeah. I agree with Ravi completely.
Yes, Professor Maurits?
Hi, Professor. Can you unmute your mic for us?
Unmute your phone. Yeah. Unmute, Professor.
Hello.
Yes. We're hearing you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that also in Suriname, that since the end of the 19th century, rice production has been improved. I want to say also that the rice has not been introduced by the Indians. We had it already in the time of slavery, especially the Maroons had their own kind of rice production. But since the arrival of the Indians in Suriname, they started production of rice, and rice became an export product. Previously, we imported rice in Suriname, and that costed a lot of money. But since the Indians started the production of rice, rice became an export product of Suriname. And just as Guyana, we have rice production, and that is almost exclusively done by the Indians until now in our country. And I think that is a very important contribution for Suriname and for the Caribbean.
And returning to Indian contributions to the region in a little later, I just want to, if you could delve a little deeper into how Indian arrival became a holiday in both Trinidad and in Guyana. And I recall quite distinctly visiting Trinidad for the first time in 1981. I met Mr. Panday at one of the Indian Arrival Day functions. And I believe it was some youth groups out of the university that started the movement of getting it into holiday. I believe Ramda Jagisar and perhaps Suraj Rambachan, Samaru Siwa, and other youngsters. Yeah. You would like to explain that a little further, Mr. Panday?
Well, as I say, he started this call for it. And I believe it may have been inspired by the fact that the government had declared Emancipation Day as a recognition of the Afro-Trinidadian community. And that may very well have inspired the need to also have recognition of the Indian community. And it started with these youngsters at the university and so on. Went on for quite a long time, actually, until it eventually became Indian Arrival Day.
I do remember, I think it was in 87 or thereabout, Kelvin Ramnath and no, it was Trevor Sudama who piloted a bill for Indian Arrival Day to be a holiday, and it was rejected
Yes.
by the NAR government. And among those people who opposed it were Winston Dukaran, Brinsley Samaru, even Suraj Rambachan himself, who had initiated this kind of movement before. Kamla Prasad Bisesa also was in the government, and she opposed it also as a holiday. And it took quite a struggle before it was eventually given in 1995, as you rightly stated. And you changed the name to Indian Arrival Day when you became Prime Minister. I think it was in October.
Manning was trying to avoid the word Indian. Such was the kind of ethnic antagonism in the society that he was trying to avoid the word Indian. He said, Arrival Day. He said, because everybody has arrived. But everybody didn't arrive on the 30th, did they?
and so we had a similar problem in Guyana. I believe for the longest while, as Ravi Dev pointed out, Ramakant Day was observed not as a holiday, but it was observed and recognized, and there were celebrations and festivals all over the country. And it took a long struggle, quite a movement. And I remember friends of mine who went down to Guyana in the 80s and sort of pilot this movement to make it a holiday. Ravi Dev himself was one of those leaders of that movement.
Let me say that it's an interesting thing how these things work out, because I was in New York in the 70s and 80s, and the events in Trinidad redounded in New York because you had a Caribbean community, and the community in Queens was just gelling. So when the Indo-Caribbean Federation, I was part of that, you were part of that, we started a commemoration in Smoky Park. The leader of the group, Mr. Nath, again following custom in Guyana, called it Indian Immigration Day. And I remember consciously having been influenced by events in Trinidad. I literally was a handwritten thing that I wrote out, and I changed it to Indian Arrival Day. That was in 84 or 85. So when I returned in Guyana, part of the Jaguar Committee for Democracy, we launched this call for Indian Arrival Day. And when I entered Parliament, there had been such a furor by then, and we got it into the parliamentary debate. It was debated, and however, the PPP, which was in government then, they put a motion for Arrival Day. And this was so ironic because in Trinidad, you had Arrival Day by Manning, and Mr. Panday changed it. And so in fact, in my talk, it's on the Hansard, I pointed out the irony of what had been undone, the injustice that had been undone in Trinidad by Mr. Panday was now being done and repeated in Guyana. So it remains to this day, because I was part of the committee that we had people, we give our hearings, we sat for about 40 meetings, and we passed, the committee then unanimously recommended to Parliament that there should be a holiday. But the caveat that the committee, and this was dominated by PPP members, noted that all of the groups and individuals that recommended the day called for Indian Arrival Day. And we are noting that because of our remit, we have to now say Indian because that's the motion, and it was passed. So till today, it is Arrival Day in Guyana. And in fact, I wrote a letter that was published on May 5th that called that let us stop this charade. And it has now caused a furor inadvertently, but because of this ambiguity, because the African Guyanese community says they didn't arrive in the same manner as the indentured, which is true. So why are they all being lumped? So I think to save this worry, let's make it simple. Indian Arrival Day is May 5th, and it ought to be.
Okay, so that was never an issue in Suriname. So we will not burden Professor Maurits Hassankhan to delve into that issue. But I had cut him off when he was going to explain the contributions of the indentured laborers and culture and other aspects of life in Suriname. So if I could ask you to proceed with that.
Professor,
And if you do wish to talk, if you do want to enter into this discussion about Indian Arrival Day and its justification, please do.
Professor, can you unmute for us, please? Sorry.
Maurits, you have to unmute.
Unmute.
Yes, there you go. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. In Suriname, it was not a controversial thing because everybody recognized that we have a number of groups who have brought to Suriname or came to Suriname, and we recognize their immigration day or arrival day, but we call it immigration day. So it was not a problem for us, and we are free to commemorate in the way we want to do it. So we don't have any problems about that. So I think that is very, very important, and that is since the 1950s, when we had a government in which the two largest political parties worked together. That was at that moment the United Indian Party and the National Political Party, National Party Suriname, from the Afro-Surinamese and the Indians. They worked together, and from that time on, we let's say we had also an accelerated period of emancipation of Indians in Suriname, because in the past they were in underdog position, second class of citizens. But since the 1950s, we had an accelerated process of emancipation, and now we are, let's say, full citizens, and we are lucky to say that at this moment we are happy that we have an Indian as a president. It's not a president for the Indian, but it's a president for whole Suriname, for the total population. So going back to the culture, I think one of the very positive aspects in the Suriname societies is that all the immigrant groups brought with them their own culture, and we respect all the cultures. And then we say, what is the Surinamese culture? Then we say that is together all the cultures make the Surinamese culture, in which we say unity in diversity, that we respect that, and everybody is free to express their culture, to do as they like, and the Indians have brought with them their language. As you know, in the Caribbean, we are the only country where we still speak our Hindustani. We call it was called Surinamese Hindustani, but now we call it Sarnami. It is a mixture of Bhojpuri, Audhi, and Maithili. So we are proud about it. And I understand that now there is a movement also in Trinidad to reintroduce the Caribbean Hindustani. I'm very glad with that initiative of Bisram is very active in that field. And hopefully maybe in Guyana, there will be also people who would like to revive the language. Okay, that is one. The language is very important. And that is what I say, the popular language of the common people, but we have also Hindi and Urdu, both of them. And they are used. And we have, I think, more than 70 Hindi schools in Suriname. More than 70 Hindi schools in Suriname. We don't have very much Urdu schools anymore, but previously, every mosque, every masjid with its Jamaat, they had their own Urdu school. So that made it possible that the Indians have preserved their language. They understand. They speak Hindi, Urdu, and they speak also the Sarnami. Only we have problems with the younger generation that the parents speak Dutch. What is your home language? Then it became the first one has become Dutch, but they are bilingual, most of them. But we have now a development that the parents speak Dutch with their children, so the children are not learning the Hindustani language. So it is a development way what we are afraid of that will happen. What has happened in Guyana and Trinidad. So that is something a concern for us. How to avoid that? That is one. About music, uh, His Excellency Mr. Panday uh, talked about Chutney music. Chutney music is common now, not only in the Caribbean, in the whole world where you have the Girmitias, where you have the indented laborers. Only in Suriname, we previously talked about Baitag Gana. That was what in Guyana you call tan singing, I think in Guyana. Tan singing. Baitag Gana, kind of classical music, but with bhajan and kawali, everything in it. And that happened during the whole night when you have a wedding party and so on. And within the Baitag Gana, you have different styles. And chutney music was one of them. Only we did not use the term chutney, but it existed also in Suriname. And I understand that now chutney is also popular in Fiji, in South Africa. Although the people don't speak overseas Hindi, still I have read that, an article that chutney music in South Africa is very popular. So that is the global culture of the Girmitias. Our identity as indented labor as descendants. And then I'm not talking about our dress and so on. All these things we know, and we are proud about it. Only we don't wear it every day. When we have a wedding party or a religious ceremony and so on, then we wear it mostly. So these are in the field of culture. Also in philosophy, I think the Indian philosophy has its impact on the Indians, on Hindus, on Muslims, and especially the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi has been very, very influential in Suriname. For instance, Jagannath Lakshman, the leader of the Indians during 50 years long after 1945, he was a disciple of Mahatma Gandhi about peace and tolerance and cooperation with each other. And that was his philosophy. And he had a very huge influence in Suriname society with this philosophy. Okay, that was
All right. So we'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll talk some more about cultural contributions in the region.
Travel Caribbean and JetBlue. So let TravelSpan compare all airlines and offer you the best fare. Call TravelSpan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's TravelSpan at 718-845-0437. Call TravelSpan in New York at 718-845-0437, Georgetown at 227-1701, or Berbice at 337-4287. In New York, 718-845-0437, Georgetown 227-1701, or Berbice 337-4287, and West Coast Demerara at 269-0140. Let TravelSpan book you the best deals for you and your families. You can now have all your groceries delivered to your home. AllFromOneSupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all US states. Our shoppers choose the best items, packaged nicely, and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all US states. TravelSpan now has travel and shipping services. Shop online and deliver to TravelSpan to handle all of your shipping to Guyana and Trinidad. TravelSpan brings 26 years of experience in the travel business. TravelSpan will clear your items and have it available at any of our offices in Guyana or Trinidad. So go online and purchase your item, then let TravelSpan handle all the shipping. Shop and ship made easy with TravelSpan, with offices in New York, Georgetown, Berbice, West Coast Demerara, and Trinidad. TravelSpan, serving you with your airlines and shipping needs. Call in New York 718-845-0437 and in Guyana call 227-1701. That's in New York 718-845-0437 and in Guyana 227-1701. And in Trinidad call 672-2060. That's 672-2060. AllFromOneSupplier.com is promoting Gaisuku sugar as a way to support Guyana sugar industry. Purchase your Gaisuku sugar from AllFromOneSupplier.com along with your West Indian and American groceries. Purchasing Gaisuku sugar is a good fate gesture to help restore the sugar industry. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free shipping and delivery, and we ship to all states and free deliveries in New York. Log on to allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's allfromonesupplier.com or 718-551-3292.
Okay, Vishnu.
Okay, so welcome back, viewers, listeners. Welcome back, gentlemen. This distinguished panel, former Prime Minister Mr. Basdeo Panday, Professor Maurits Hassankhan, the Department of History, University of Suriname, Mr. Ravi Dev, distinguished lawyer, former lawyer in New York, one could say still a lawyer in New York, called to the bar in New York and called to the bar in Guyana, among a few only Guyanese or West Indians who were called to bar in more than one locations. You are watching Globespan 24/7. I'm Vishnu Bisram. Globespan is owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh of Globespan. And with us tonight is technical contributor, advisor, Mr. Devin. Gentlemen, we have talked a lot about the history of Indian arrival and cultural contributions. I wonder if now we could shift a little towards the political development. The role that Indians have played politically in Trinidad and Tobago, as we all know that the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago of Indian origin is Mr. Basdeo Panday, and he was followed by some years later by Ms. Kamla Prasad Bisesar. In Guyana, we have had Dr. Chetty Jagan, and some years later, Mr. Barajagdeo, Donald Rabutar, and now we have Mr. Irfan Ali. So I was wondering, Mr. Panday, would you like to lead us off a little into the political contribution of Indians to the region or to your society?
I believe, first of all, that the political system in Trinidad and Tobago is unsuited to the country. It's irrelevant. We have adopted the Westminster system, and people say, but it's working in England. I said, that's right, because English. And the point about it is, a system was imposed on Trinidad and Tobago that did not take into consideration the ethnic and racial division, which coincided with the geographical division, like in Guyana. So that the Indians were living in one area and the Africans living in another area, and they introduced the first past the post system. That was bound to result in racial voting and ethnic voting. And that has crippled the country. As a matter of fact, the problems in which we have found ourselves since then can be attributed to one single factor: the political system in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago enjoyed hundreds of billions of dollars in the oil industry. And you know, today we are borrowing money to pay debts because of a system of corruption, waste, and mismanagement, which was perpetuated by the political system. And we suffer from that problem even today. And my humble conclusion is that it will never end unless we change the Constitution.
All right, so before we address that part of it, let's get Mr. Ravi Dev contribution, and then Professor Maurits Hassankhan.
Well, we have to look in all matters about society, whether it's politics or culture and all that, we have to look at it historically. And we come back to Indian and their arrival in the Caribbean. We were inserted into the Caribbean in a society that had already been formed, primarily in a hegemonic way by the British, or in the Suriname and the Dutch. And therefore, we were expected under that paradigm to assimilate into it. Therefore, the groups that preceded Indians saw themselves as having more legitimacy to whatever was the national patrimony. So in the early political development after World War II, when the question of who would govern these colonies arose, you had in both Trinidad and Suriname, and Guyana, and Suriname to an extent also, you had the Creole element assuming that they had a mantle for inheriting the British rule. That was a given. So, but this is where culture comes in, because we are all actuated by narratives that come out of our cultures. So when Eric Williams returned to Trinidad, he actively cultivated as national culture Afro-Trinidadian culture. So if you look at what occurred in Woodbrook with McBurney, with Calypso, with Steel Pan, with Carnival, they were given state backing to develop them, and that became Trinidad national culture. Burnham did the same thing in Guyana. So when you look at when he talked, Black Power had swept the region in the 60s. So when Burnham brought a whole bunch of Black Power activists within his government to rewrite his cultural policy, Indians were then excluded from what is national. Both in Trinidad and in Guyana, we were seen as quote unquote ethnic. So Indian arrival was a rebellion against that, to say, hey, we are here and we demand to be recognized. So as I said, it is not coincidental that this call came in the midst of political development. Hence Mr. Panday's rise to power. It is an expression that you cannot exclude a group of people that constitute either the greater plurality or the majority, as in Guyana. It had to have happened. So I will then spend some time in Guyana. So you had Cheddi Jagan, who had returned in 1943 and had gone into parliament in 1947. And it was unexpected because the Creole class expected that they would be the inheritance of that. So as they say in American football, he did an end run around them. Of course, he tried to constitute, to address Mr. Panday's concern. Dr. Jagan, even though he was a Marxist, consciously constituted an ethnic balanced group in the first group, called the PAC. They were Chinese, they were Portuguese, they were local whites, they were Indians, and he brought back Mr. Burnham. Mr. Burnham was recommended by a supporter, a Jamaican communist in London called Billy Stratton, to come back, and he came back here. So Dr. Jagan thought he was addressing this. But I want to come back, and I don't know if Mr. Panday will agree, but the problem we are seeing in Guyana politics is that the Indian is still not seen as a legitimate holder of national power. So for 28 years, Burnham could rig his way into power without, by and large, without any outcry from the great amount of his constituency. The WPA that opposed him has now disappeared, and in fact, in the present rigging attempt, all the WPA African Guyanese and the PNC African Guyanese have joined forces and are now excusing this rigging attempt to keep out the PPP, which won an election by the rules that they had gone into power. So to come back to your position, Guyana has a much more polarized situation, but it comes out of this concept in the Caribbean that the Indian is still not seen as a legitimate Caribbean man.
Professor Maurits, Hassankhan, I saw your hand was up. You wanted to say something. So unmute.
During our last conference in 2018, we had a very popular panel with 2 or 3 sessions on ethnicity and politics. A lot of people wanted to say something about it. And my impression is that in Guyana, in Trinidad, there are intellectuals, scholars. I don't know if we have also about the politicians, people who are in favor of what you call a power sharing, because we are not very content with the Westminster system of democracy. In Suriname, we have, in comparison to Guyana and Trinidad, we have no how you say, a numerical majority of any group. We have much more ethnic groups, so none of them are able to have sole power. So they have to collaborate with each other. Mm-hmm. And in Suriname, we have now also a development that all the former ethnic parties, I call them mono-ethnic parties, they are becoming now multi-ethnic parties. So they try to get people from all ethnic groups within the party. And that is a form of what in political science they call it also consensus democracy from Aaron Clyde. I think it would be very good to take an initiative to bring together politicians and scholars from Guyana, from Trinidad and Suriname together and to discuss about this. I am very curious. Indians are complaining about the system. Now they are in power in Guyana. Are they willing to share power with the other one? Is it better for Guyana that you have always a government in which all the groups are represented? So I think it is very important to try to get also the politicians involved in this discussion. And then to create a consensus, change the political system, to change your constitution, so that you can have always a government in which all groups feel that they are represented in the government. I think that is very, very important. And about talking about Suriname, we have been very lucky since the 1950s, as I said, that the leaders of the two largest ethnic groups, and these were at that moment the Indians, the Hindustanis, we call ourselves Hindustanis, and the Creoles, that were the descendants of the slaves. And we have another Afro-Surinamese group that are the Maroons. For your information, at this moment, the Maroons are the second largest group in Suriname. And as you know, that for the first time in Suriname's history, a Maroon has become vice president. And his goal is for the next elections to try to become president of Suriname. That would be a very revolutionary thing, and also in the mind of the people, because most of the people think that the Maroons are backward people. But during the past decades, they have developed. A lot of Maroons are at the universities, they are academics and so on. So they are not stupid people. They are also very clever, just as Indians are also clever, just as Afro-Surinamese are clever. So I think that is very important to try to create a system in which all groups feel that they are represented in the government. But that is a revolutionary way of thinking to create a new political system in the multi-ethnic societies that we are.
Mr. Panday, is that what you have in mind? Something like that?
In Trinidad, we have been able to reach where we are because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement. But we cannot deal with it because of the political system. Because, you see, a democracy is a parliament which passes law, which is separate from an executive, which carries out the instructions of parliament. But when the parliament and the executive is the same, there is no accountability. And that is the problem in Trinidad and Tobago. That is to say, the parliament does not control the executive controls the parliament. So therefore they can vote what they want, do what they want, and are accountable to nobody. And that's why we were able to spend hundreds of billions of dollars. And today we have none.
Ravi Dev, sir, I believe at some point in time you had talked about power sharing and decentralization of power. You want to expand on that?
I'll tell you what, I left my job, I left whatever I had, my career in New York, and I've been back in Guyana for 30 years now. And in 1990, I wrote a paper talking about all the things that Maurits wrote about, called For a New Political Culture. And there was supposed to be a conference between the PNC, PPP, and the WPA at that point. Dr. Jaga agreed. At that point, Mr. Hoyt had agreed. Interestingly enough, the party that didn't agree, they were the consensualist party, WPA, because they felt, and this is where politics come in, theory is always thrown overboard when it comes to reality of those who think they can have power. The WPA by '92 figured that they had broken the back of racial politics, as it was called, and they refused to talk about it because they felt they would win the elections. They lost because ethnicity proved to be the trump card. And Dr. Jagan had to grapple with that in 1992. By 1997, all hell broke loose. And I was in Parliament when the Constitution was altered. And like what Maurice is saying, we put forward a whole new Constitution. And we proposed all these things, consociationalism, and all the other panaceas. I'm not dismissive, but they were panaceas. But when the when the two big parties came into being, even the PNC did not want power sharing. Because you see, they all feel, because the numbers in Guyana, we are a bicommunal state, the numbers almost match each other, that either side believes that they can win. With a little bit of a nudge, they can win. Therefore, in 2000, when we had hundreds of changes to the Constitution, neither side wanted power sharing, and they wanted to tinker. So we had what is now called a total first past the post, or a total proportional representation system. We have a mixed system. 40% are first our constituency, and the rest is PR. We have tried all kinds. We have now parliamentary committees that can scrutinize governmental operations in real time. Those are all innovations, but didn't work. The problem is that you have individuals in government, when they get in there, they will then follow their own inclinations. The writer, the person who put together the Indian Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar, said, you can create the best constitution in the world, but it all depends on the men who will be institutionalizing that constitution and carrying out its mandate. And what we see in Guyana, Guyana is also, like Suriname, a nation of minorities. The Indians have lost their majority. Indians are now down to about 35%. So any party that wins an election had to have moderated its appeal to reach across the divide. So that is how the PNC got into power in 2015. But by their actions when they got into power, they stomped on the Indian concerns, closed their estates, fired a lot of Indians, and in a sense shot themselves in their own foot, and they were voted out. And now they are crying foul. So the same system that got them into office, they're now saying was rigged by the PPP, who was out of office. Now, I hold no flag for the PPP. I am and never was PPP. But the point is, if you have rules of the game in any constitution, but you have a constituency that does not see you as a legitimate power holder, they will riot, and they will come out in the streets. And I'm talking Guyana now. And I predicted this before the last election. You were on some of these discussions, Maurits. And I said there will be violence afterwards. And lo and behold, there was. And I'm saying here and now, in May of 2021, there will be violence in Guyana within a year or two, because the party does not accept Indian or an Indian-dominated government, even though that Indian-dominated government concedes it is so, but has consciously reached out and have a program and have policies and have brought people from outside into it. So you have a situation in Guyana that is very, very volatile, and right now the government will be initiating electoral reform, Maurits, and people will be invited to make recommendations. Let's see what happens. I am not very sanguine about what's going to come out of it.
Professor, you want to comment on what Ravi there said?
I would take
I agree with it. So I believe that is a system in which you have always at least the main groups are represented in the government, and that would be another kind of democracy.
Sorry about that.
That should be included in the constitution also, with the rules that belongs to that system. Aaron Claypart, an American Dutch political scientist, has written a lot on this, and I believe in that. And I really do hope that the people in Guyana and in Trinidad can be convinced that this would be the best political system for these countries, for these societies.
I do
and
this has been debated. This has been on the agenda for 30 years, as I said, Maurits, and we have to go on real politics.
Yeah.
It comes back to fundamental contradictions in the society that have to be addressed. They say that political change do not precede changes in cultural consciousness. The cultural consciousness must come first, both in the leadership and the people of a country. The people and the leadership have to understand and agree with the cultural and moral changes that are necessary. So I posit, and that what is happening in Guyana is that we have to work at the bottom in these cases, but it's not happening. We thought young Guyanese, young people, like I said, I've been here 30 years. I thought the young youths would have begun to see the need for what you're talking about. It sounds immensely reasonable, but it's not happening. The youths are just as polarized ethnically in Guyana. And I'm only talking Guyana now. We saw it in the voting. When you disaggregate the votes, as we have done, because in Guyana is as segregated as South Africa was. In the village where I live here, it's 100% Indians. Right across the road, it's 100% Africans, and you go down. So we can know who voted how just by going to the polling station and looking at those numbers. Very little cross voting.
Mr. Panday?
I saw that Ghana tried to get away from this first past the post system by introducing proportional representation. But that did not solve the problem because the legislature was not separated from the executive. That's the problem. And unless we can separate the legislature that makes the laws and supervises the executive, there'll be no change in our condition. Once you have the parliamentary power to vote money onto yourself, and you are accountable for it, there'll be no end of corruption, waste, and mismanagement. So Ghana tried, but the only thing that slipped was they did not separate the legislature from the executive. That is what they missed.
So you're proposing something like the United States, where the executive is separated from the legislative branch?
Well, whether it's United States or not, in a place like Trinidad and Tobago, we will develop our own unique system relevant to the objective situation that obtains in our country. But the objective is to separate the watchdog from the thief.
We'll have Professor Maurits Hassankhan, then we'll go for a break. Professor Maurits.
Yeah, just very short. I think when you want to separate the legislative from the executive, then you have to introduce a presidential system. As
yes.
You have
no problem. No problem.
Have a presidential system because the election of the president is separate from the election of the members of parliament.
That's good.
I think that is a condition to can reach this what you are telling. I think that would be better because in the system as we have also in Suriname, because the political parties decide who will become the ministers and so on. And then you have the government formed by political parties. And you have the members in the parliament. They have to obey. They have to do what is the policy of the political party. And the leader of the political party is the president of the country. So that's the problem. So we have to, I think we have to change the system and to introduce, instead of parliamentary system, you should have a presidential system.
Okay, with that, we'll take a break. And when we come back, we'll hear from Ravi Dev and then Basdeo Panday again.
All From One Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromonesupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All from One Supplier has it all. All from One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All from One Supplier today to start shopping, or call All from One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All from One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com. Globespan 24/7 continues its efforts to serve the communities. The platform provides for all sides to air their views and discuss solutions. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in these discussions. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese an opportunity to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The Globespan 24/7 platform connects the diaspora and the world with Guyana. So become a supporter of Globespan 24/7 today by clicking the badge icon on the lower right side of your screen. For only $10 a month, you will be a supporter of Globespan 24/7 initiative and have a badge displayed on your Facebook profile. Help us to continue to serve the communities.
So welcome back, viewers, listeners, to Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Ms. Nohar Singh, with Mr. Devin as our technical control operator. I am Vishnu Bisram, and with me this evening are three very distinguished gentlemen: former Prime Minister Mr. Basdeo Panday, current Professor of History at University of Suriname, Professor Maurits Hassankhan, and Mr. Ravi Dev, media, should I say media magnate in Trinidad, in Guyana. So, gentlemen, we were discussing political reform in these three societies, Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, and Mr. Panday had the floor before. So, Mr. Ravi Dev, you have any views on political reform?
Yes. As you can tell, strong views. I think it was the philosopher Immanuel Kant that says ought implies can. That we're talking about what ought to happen, but we have to try to be realistic and ask what can happen. In my 30 years of experience in Guyana on the ground, running between political parties, writing voluminous tomes and letters and what have you on these same matters, we have gone through all of them. And I don't want to sound jaded, but I want to be realistic. Neither of the two political behemoths in Guyana, they will talk this language, for example, but they will not put it into effect. The PNC, when it got into office, talked about it being a coalition, that it brought in an Indian-dominated party, a smaller party. But it did not, but as soon as it got into office, it governed as if it were alone, knowing that it was an African-dominated party. So we saw that for 28 years under Mr. Burnham and under 5 years under the PNC in between 2015 and 2021. So in looking forward, what ought to happen, we know and we can put these things, but what I think can happen is that we now have a nation of minorities, and we can then look and work only at the grassroots to change the political consciousness of the people. Guyana is still a very poverty-stricken country. The hope is that as the income level rises with the new economic development that will come out of the oil industry and the other industries that are on stream, that individuals will begin to think a little more dispassionately. That is the hope. But coming back to working with the two political parties as they are right now, the PPP can say with a very straight face, which it did, that with Indians only 35% of the population. They couldn't have gotten there only with Indian Guyanese. Therefore, they have satisfied the need for inclusivity. Similarly, the PNC, if it gets in, they will claim the same thing. So you have a kind of what is called a Mexican standoff. Neither side is going to give. So again, I want to say that I'm not very optimistic in the near future.
And so what's the solution?
You see, Vishnu, if I might, solutions when it comes to human institutions are never simple. England could have had the parliamentary system work. America could have had its system work when whites were the largest majority, so in a sense, they were sharing power amongst themselves. Now that their majorities are threatened, we see that America is going full blast into ethnic politics. That's what it is. Whites are now becoming an ethnic group in America, and they are acting as an ethnic group to close ranks and keep out others. England has seen the same thing. They've come out of the EU because they felt they're going to be swamped with Poles and others, people in England now. Let us see them. The movement towards identity politics has now caught up with the liberal philosophy that has governed for over 2 centuries. And the whole premises of liberalism assumed that reason would work. But it only worked when you had, as I said before, one group with such a majority that they were sharing power among themselves. In most of the countries of the world now, that mask has been pulled off. So we will need a whole new paradigm to deal with identity politics. And I return in my conclusion to talk about what the Indians can offer when we brought our culture to the Caribbean, because we were not allowed to express our culture, and it has been subjugated, and people don't even look to Indians for solution within the culture we brought. There is an epistemological violence done on us, a hermeneutic violence that we can't explain. And I'll say this one thing. Indian civilization was founded on one principle, Ekoham Pahusyam, that he who created this universe says, I am one, let there be many. Meaning we start with the facticity of diversity. And the challenge we say in any society that you put forward, how do you deal with diversity? The West started with an opposite paradigm, e pluribus unum, that out of many, one. So they've been trying to straitjacket all of us to see as one. I would like to posit, and this is what we will have to do in the Caribbean, go back to some of what we have a civilization 6,000 years was able to survive. You had the Ottoman Empire survive for 5,000 years in the same Balkans that has broken apart through the introduction of this democratic system. The Ottomans had it for 5 centuries and they were living there. How come? Let us look at these so-called old models and overthrow this notion that modernity is only a Western notion. There can be other means of being modern and resolving some of these problems. I think I've spoken my piece. Thank you.
Professor, you want to comment on that? Unmute. Unmute, Professor.
I have said already what I wanted to say, and I agree with Ravi and also with Mr. Basdeo Panday. So I only hope that scholars and politicians can join each other in discussions about what should be the best system for these countries, for them.
But do you have any ideas on how we could get them to cooperate, to work together? Because clearly, one group cannot dominate another. It's not going to work.
Yeah. No, that's my message. That's is consensus democracy. and that people has to learn to work with that and accept another system than we have adopted at our independence, and we are accustomed to that, but we have to think about it. And I think that especially non-Western societies have some experience with this kind of democracies, with take decisions in consensus with.
Prime Minister Panday?
First of all, Professor, I want to say I agree with you absolutely. That is, why do we need a prime minister and a president? We don't. So we have a president. And we have a president that selects an executive, but the people select the parliament, and the one control the other. So I agree with you absolutely. What bothers me is this, is that, as Ravi said, nobody wants to change. But I think that history is replete with examples of people who want change, can desire that change so much that if they can't get it peacefully, they resort to violence. History is replete with examples like that. Should that happen in the Caribbean, or in the 3 countries we are talking about, that will be an absolute tragedy because of the ethnic division of the society. I can only hope and pray that somebody will see the light and that something will happen and that we will see the need for constitutional change. Maybe this will be the function of the coronavirus.
But Mr. Panday, no one has mentioned, I mean, sure, we need political reforms, but since the politicians are not agreeing to some kind of constitutional reform, shouldn't we try somehow to see if we can have decentralization of power for people to exercise power at the grassroots level, at the community level, at the local level?
But surely, to decentralize power, who will do it? Those in power. And those in power are not going to decentralize power. So no, that I'm sorry, that's not an answer.
It's not going to work. But look,
what we do is we keep appealing. We are appealing to good sense, which the fellas don't have. So I sorry.
But don't forget you were there before. Let's hear Ravi Dev.
No, I think, you see, this is our dilemma. You see, for example, we hear about Northern Ireland, that they were able to have a peace and they have a peace accord, the Good Friday Accord, and they've worked something out and it looks hunky-dory. But the variable in Northern Ireland is that they were brought to the table by a larger power that had the wherewithal to get them there. It is very unfortunate that we don't have a Mandela. So it comes back, as I said in the beginning, it comes back as to the leadership. And if the leadership do not accept certain premises, moral premises, in terms of how the society should function, you're not going to get anywhere. So in Guyana, you have one group that just does not see the other group. I might seem biased because I'm of Indian origin, but like I said, I've been here for 30 years trying to mediate between these two groups. And I was never close to the PPP, even when at least Dr. Dagan used to at least talk and be open. But the point is that we need moral leadership that will hearken to the message we're talking about. And I think that's where we have to have this moral suasion. There was a time in the Caribbean, Mr. Panday might have known about this, some wise men of the Caribbean. I don't know if you could put together a team to talk to the leaders in Guyana. What do you say?
Where will this highly moral team come from? That's my question.
That's what I'm saying. You were in politics in terms of being you're a senior Caribbean leader. We are a Caribbean people. That is what Arrival says. The Indian in the Caribbean, we are a Caribbean people. We may have, we have different cultures, but we are a Caribbean people. So do you believe that we still have that notion that you can have Caribbean leaders bring that moral suasion onto Guyana? Let's say CARICOM, for instance. Do you think that is a possibility?
Not in the immediate future.
But okay, so
if I might, Vishnu, let me finish this. In today's newspaper, coincidentally, in today's newspaper, a Guyanese who was a lawyer, senior lawyer, who was been with the UN system and did peacemaking missions in Bosnia, in Africa, in the Middle East, Far East, Bertie Ramcharan, very, very eminent individual. I forget his actual role. And he wrote along the same lines, what you and Maurits are talking about, and saying, well, this is what we have to do. But the message in the largest newspaper fell like a drop, like a pin, didn't even make a sound. In that newspaper, you can have people giving their opinion on it. Didn't even matter, which letters got all the reaction and all the things, is those that are fighting as to who rigged the election and who didn't rig the election. So I'm saying it comes back to we have to find some mechanism. The Americans have just come in, they'll help us with electoral reform. But the PNC has already said that the Americans are biased.
All right, so we are running out of time. So I'll just ask each one of you if you have any final comment to make, Mr. Panday.
Just let me say, I think the professor is right. I think we should get together and come up with a system which we believe is relevant to the Caribbean, where there is this ethnic problem. The Constitution has got to be relevant to the objective situation, to the country. It can't copy it from anybody. It has to be relevant to itself. Could we, I don't know. Mr. Chairman, you seem to have tremendous influence. Can you get together a group of people who will sit down and discuss rationally a way out of the problems we face?
I'll attempt it. I'll see if I could bring together a group for a discussion. I make that commitment. Professor Maurits Hassankhan, University.
I just want to say that decentralization is also an important part of real democracy. In Suriname, we have started the process. It is also included in our constitution. Only problem is that the politicians in the center, they are not willing to give the power to the people on local level. So we have done already something, but we have not achieved all what we need to achieve. So I think it would be also good to check what do you have in Guyana about decentralization, what do we have in Suriname, and we can take also good examples of other countries, how they work, and maybe to get the what I call the consensus democracy, that we start at least on the local level, because on local level people have to work with each other. Whether you belong to party X or Y, the people have to work together. Just as you work together in a football club or in a cricket club, then we don't look to differences, because we are all one. So I think in a local level we can take experiments with collaboration, and that on the local level you should have representative government in which people from the different political parties, they work together. But important, how to get the budget to do things on local level.
That's the key. But look, Tobago has autonomy. I can't see why Cuba, which has a bigger population than Tobago, can't have autonomy, or Chaguanas, which has a much larger population than Tobago, can't have autonomy. Mr. Ravi Dev?
Well, our first introduction into Guyana in 1988, we called for Guyana to be reconstituted as a federal republic. Guyana is large enough. It has population centers. It is remote sections that are, you just can't govern. Again, even if it did not have ethnic problems, you can't govern it from a centralized standpoint. It doesn't make sense. And we have suggested that for both, rational reasons in terms of geography, but also to solve the ethnic problem, because fortuitously, our ethnic groups are concentrated in various areas. And we showed that at least all power will not be denied to any one group. Somewhere, even if one group captures the center, they will still have some power in one of the regions and at least experience what it is. But it didn't take root, has not been moderated to call for deep centralization. So I don't want to say we have to give up. We keep on trying. But I would conclude on this that, Descartes said, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, in terms of who you are. The Indian immigrant to Guyana had another mantra, not a motto. He said, laboro ergo sum. I work, therefore I am. We brought a culture of hard work and to produce and to deliver to the nation, right? Laboro ergo sum. And I would like to feel that in Guyana, at least, with the economy finally getting its own foreign funds, I think if we all work very hard, we will soon not be maybe look at each other as us and them and begin to see our commonality. Because what is happening in Guyana, we had two incidents. In one expatriate was caught on film beating another Guyanese, viciously beating, and to make matters worse, it was a white expatriate beating an African Guyanese. In another one yesterday, one expatriate coming in with a new company actually was chasing out the Minister of Housing, even though he did not have a permission to construct this. So I am hoping that the Guyanese ethnic groups will get their act together, work very hard, because pretty soon, if we don't look out, you will have these expatriates take over and we'll be left, say, we lose corn and we lose husk. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ravi, for bringing us back around the circle. And so let me thank the viewership this evening, as well as Mr. Nohar Singh, Mr. Devin, for hosting us. Mr. Panday, any final word from you?
I am without hope.
Well, I always have hope, and I'm sure the others have hope as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for spending so much time with us.
The point is, I can see no opening. I can see no venue. I can see nowhere we can go to change, given the structure and the objective situation under which we live. And that's why I don't know what to hope for.
We'll keep trying and find something to hope for. Thank you all very much for tuning in tonight.
You have a long life, Mr. Pandey.
It doesn't look like it's going to be much longer, I can assure you that.
We should be optimistic always, I think.
Always, yes, always. So
Okay.
Devin, you could shut us down and